Let's go Dolphins! Something is happening behind the scenes with the Miami Dolphins, and the strangest thing is that almost no one is talking about it yet. Sometimes, the biggest offseason stories don't start with headlines, big trades, or dramatic announcements. Sometimes, they start with small details that most people ignore at first. But when you start putting all the pieces together, you suddenly start wondering, are we witnessing the first signs of a situation that could become much bigger? And believe me, what I'm about to tell you is causing Dolphins fans to see this roster in two completely different ways. Some are extremely confident about the direction things are taking. Others are starting to raise their eyebrows and wondering if there's something more going on behind the scenes than people realize. I'm going to analyze everything I'm seeing because there are some details here that might leave you thinking until the end of this video. But before we continue, make sure you've already clicked the like button if you truly believe the Miami Dolphins are on the right track. And I want to see the optimistic Dolphins fans appear in the comments right now and write, "Go, Dolphins! The best is yet to come." Without further ado, let's get straight to the point. During recent OTA activity, Austin Jackson was present, but there was one thing standing out immediately: he was not doing much work. Reports indicate that he is dealing with some type of nagging injury. The exact issue was not disclosed, and from what was being discussed, it does not appear to be considered serious right now. But even if it is not considered major, it is clearly enough to keep him out of action during this period. Now here's where things start becoming interesting. Because while Austin Jackson was limited, other names were out there working. Patrick Paul was out there. Brewer was out there. Proctor was out there. Other players were getting reps and continuing development while Austin Jackson was being held back. And then another detail starts making people think. His salary situation had adjustments made, reducing his salary this season to around $5.5 million after previously being around $10 million. Suddenly fans start connecting dots. Was this simply business? Or was there already awareness that Austin Jackson might be dealing with something? Nobody is saying anything definitive. Nobody is making a final conclusion. But you know how football works. Fans always start putting pieces together. Then another possibility enters the discussion. Caden Proctor. Because if Austin Jackson cannot return quickly, if this injury continues lingering, if things do not progress as expected, suddenly conversations begin about what happens next. Suddenly people begin looking at possible lineup changes. Suddenly fans begin wondering if alternative plans are already sitting there waiting. And then you start hearing those quiet offseason possibilities. Imagine training camp arrives and reports start coming out about Caden Proctor getting important reps. Imagine hearing updates saying he is matching up against pass rushers during practices. Fans would immediately begin wondering where those reps are happening and why. That is what makes this fascinating. Because right now nothing dramatic has happened. But football fans know something very well. Sometimes the biggest stories start with small observations. And while that situation creates questions, another thing happening around the team created a completely different reaction. Jordan Brooks. The Dolphins released a mic'd up video and something jumped out immediately: communication. You could hear the energy. You could hear the interaction. You could hear the leadership. You could hear him talking with teammates, helping guys, staying engaged, staying vocal, constantly communicating during drills. That stood out, because leadership is not always about speeches. Sometimes leadership appears during small moments. It appears in communication. It appears in helping teammates. It appears in making sure people stay focused. There was even discussion surrounding Brooks helping younger players and staying involved throughout the action. The energy felt noticeable. And now another interesting conversation starts appearing. Could Brooks become one of the next players to receive a new deal? Again, nothing confirmed. But people are already looking at his presence, his communication style, and the way he carries himself and beginning to wonder if something could happen before training camp arrives. So now Dolphins fans are sitting in an interesting position. On one side you have questions around Austin Jackson and his availability moving forward. On the other side you have Jordan Brooks creating positive attention through leadership and communication. Two completely different stories. Two completely different emotions. One creating uncertainty, the other creating excitement. The thing that makes this entire situation so interesting is that we are still very early in the process, and yet you can already feel fans beginning to build different opinions about what these signs could mean moving forward. Some people are looking at Austin Jackson and saying this is nothing, that the team is simply taking a careful approach, making sure a player dealing with a nagging issue does not push himself unnecessarily during off-season work. Those fans are saying relax, this happens every year, let the player heal and revisit the discussion once training camp begins. But then there's the other side. There are fans looking at all of this and saying, hold on for a second. We have seen situations before where something starts as nothing serious and then suddenly weeks go by, then more weeks go by, then before you know it everybody is asking the same question. When is he coming back? Again, nobody is saying that is happening here. But because there are not many details available, it creates space for speculation. And whenever there is empty space, football fans fill it immediately. That is why all eyes are going to start moving toward training camp updates. Every rep is going to matter. Every observation is going to matter. Every little report is going to matter. Because remember something interesting that was being discussed. During these practices, information coming out is limited. There are restrictions on certain things being disclosed. You are not necessarily going to hear somebody come out and directly tell everybody exactly who is lining up where every single moment. But fans are smart. Fans listen. Fans pay attention. If reports start coming out saying Caden Proctor is getting repeated work against edge rushers, fans are going to notice. If people start hearing descriptions involving matchups and repetitions, suddenly people start piecing things together themselves. You know exactly how this works. Somebody says one little thing. Another person notices another detail. Then suddenly social media starts exploding. Then suddenly everybody has theories. And all of a sudden a conversation that looked tiny becomes one of the hottest topics surrounding the team. But while uncertainty exists on one side, the Jordan Brooks situation keeps creating the opposite feeling. Because watching those interactions gave a completely different vibe. You could hear him constantly engaged with teammates. You could hear him communicating, encouraging, talking through situations and staying active throughout drills. And one thing that stands out with players like that is something fans always love seeing: energy. Fans love talent. Fans love athletic ability. Fans love production. But fans absolutely love leadership. Because leadership changes the atmosphere around a team. And when you hear a player actively communicating and helping teammates during these moments, people immediately start paying attention. There was also something interesting about how natural it looked. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt like somebody trying to create a moment for cameras. It felt like a player simply being himself. And that matters. Because leadership inside a locker room does not always happen during game day speeches or giant moments in front of everybody. Sometimes it happens during practice. Sometimes it happens during drills. Sometimes it happens during conversations that fans never even hear. And if Brooks keeps creating that type of impression, then maybe those conversations about his future start getting louder. Maybe people start wondering if the organization sees something beyond just on-field production. Maybe they see value in the way he interacts with teammates. Maybe they see value in his presence. Again, nobody is confirming anything. But these are the types of conversations that naturally start building. And now we are entering that stage of the offseason where every little update becomes important. Every practice note. Every observation. Every rep. Because right now we are not talking about final answers. We are talking about clues. And sometimes clues tell us a lot before the full story finally appears. Now I want to hear from every Dolphins fan watching this. Do you think fans are overreacting to Austin Jackson's situation, or do you believe there is actually